When I rolled credits on Elden Ring for the first time, I was at a loss of words. Yes, I was ecstatic that I had finally beat the Elden Beast, but that excitement was quickly overshadowed by the realization that this almost 100-hour journey was now over. I was bombarded with emotions. Sad emotions, realizing that I will never get to experience this game for the first time again, but also happy emotions, making me think of the memories that I have made with this game. It would be a lie to say that my first experience with Elden Ring was fun. Just like any first-time Souls player, I had a massive skill issue. I died a lot.
Put these foolish ambitions to rest.
I couldn't get most of the mechanics of the game that I tried to interact with to work. Souls games are like this by design. The designers of Souls games are not scared to lose new players because the games are too confusing or hard. Instead, Souls games prioritize players who stick around to learn the game's mechanics and, get good. Because of this, most people's favorite Souls game is the first one they played because they would not have gotten that same feeling when they figured out something from other Souls games. Elden Ring did this to me like other Souls games did to many other people. Whether it was realizing that I could two-hand my weapon or that I could use special skills with my left trigger, I always found it so rewarding when I figured out a mechanic of the game. Whenever I figured out something new, it would always help me with something that I once struggled with. For example, when I got to the first boss of the game, Margit, I was having trouble because I wasn't getting much damage out of my light and heavy attacks. I either needed something that could help me do more damage or something that could help me break his stance easier, so that I could deal a lot of damage whilst his stance was broken. After messing around for a little bit, I eventually realized that my weapon had an Ash of War that would sheath my weapon and then unsheath it for a very powerful attack. This helped me with the two issues that were preventing me from beating the boss. This is why my first experience with Elden Ring will always be so memorable. It was the first Souls game that I played, and it was the most difficulty that I've ever had with a game. Some people would argue that the game not clearly teaching the player gameplay mechanics is a bad thing, but with the difficulty of Souls games, it feels like it was meant to be like this. It feels so perfect that the game doesn't teach you some mechanics, or at least if you don't press a button, because these games are supposed to be difficult. This makes it all the more rewarding when you finally master the mechanics of the game. This game isn't just hard to master, but it's also hard to learn. One of the main draws to Elden Ring is its massive open world. Instead of taking an approach like the modern Zelda games and letting the player go anywhere as soon as they beat the tutorial, Elden Ring lets players go to some areas but blocks some off. You can go to most areas from the very start of the game, but some will be guarded by bosses or have a secret route that is hard to find, like this path around Stormveil Castle. Siofra River is hidden behind this random area of the map, and whilst technically accessible from the very start of the game, it is very hard to find. Ultra's Plateau is also guarded off by the player needing 2 halves of a medallion to get the lift to start working. This leaves just Limgrave, the Weeping Peninsula, and Caelid for players to explore when they start the game, assuming that they don't find the secret path to Leonia. Caelid has a lot stronger enemies than the other 2 areas, so most players will just explore those too. It's this form of segmenting areas from one another that makes Elden Ring have a truly great open world. It lets the game guide players to the right areas without telling them what to do. It provides freedom to players who don't want to explore other areas, but also prevents players who want to progress the game the intended way from not knowing what to do. Of course, it is still easy to get lost in the Weeping Peninsula and Limgrave, but it is easier to find your way around compared to being able to explore the whole map. This game still must make the player feel lost, because without that feeling, are you really even exploring? Segmenting the map also stops the game from feeling overwhelming. This is something that I feel some other open world games struggle to balance. When you make it open world, you want the world to feel like it has a lot of things to do, but you also don't want it to feel overwhelming. Elden Ring perfectly balances this idea in a way that I think not many other games have been able to replicate. Elden Ring has many weapons and an upgrading system that is very rewarding. One problem with this is that it is easy for players to get some of the most overpowered equipment from the very start of the game, and then not have to worry about any challenges for the rest of the game. In fact, you can get a fully upgraded weapon from the very start of the game, and guess how many bosses you have to fight to do this? 1. And this boss can easily be cheesed with sleep pots. So I realized this after recording, but I forgot you need to fight 2 bosses to get a plus 10 weapon. You can only get a plus 9 from fighting 1 boss because you need a Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone, and the earliest you can get one of those is by fighting a Great Rune boss, and then advancing Vare's questline so that you can get to Mogwin Palace and then open a chest. But you can still get a plus 9 weapon, so that's still OP, so yeah. It is kind of hard to make an open world RPG because you must balance the freedom that you are giving the player without making it so that the player can get too OP to the point where the bosses are too easy. This is something that Elden Ring can't avoid. Even if the developers limited the players and did not let them explore some areas, then players would still find a way to get to level 50 before Margit. Even though I know it is hard to balance this, I still think From Software could have done a better job. If they did not let the player go to Caelid from the start of the game, it would have made it a lot harder to get overpowered as soon as you start the game. You see, to upgrade some of the stronger weapons in this game, you will need Somber Smithing Stones. You only need 10 Somber Stones to fully upgrade one of these weapons compared to 25 normal Smithing Stones to upgrade normal weapons. In Liurnia, you can get Somber Stones 1 through 4, and in Caelid, not only can you get Somber Stones 8 and 9, but you can also get half of a medallion that will let you go into Altus, with the other half being in Limgrave. Altus Plateau then grants you access to Volcano Manor. In Volcano Manor, you can get Somber Stone 6 and 5. If you've been keeping track, you'll know that we only need Somber 7. This Somber 7 is located right after the Godskin Noble boss, the same boss that you can cheese with sleep pots. Blocking off just Caelid and making it accessible later would make it so that the maximum that you can upgrade your weapon to with Somber Stones is to plus 4 until later in the game. One way they could have done this is by putting a boss guarding Caelid and making the boss trap the player in an arena if they attempt to enter Caelid. When talking about this game, people often bring up that the bosses in this game, especially towards the end, move too fast. Now, I'm not going to exaggerate this, it's honestly not that bad. Some prior Souls games had bosses that moved slowly but had large health bars and were difficult because of that. Elden Ring and some of the newer Souls entries have bosses that move fast but have small health bars. When you keep this in mind, you realize that your main goal for every fight is to maximize your damage output. There is a reason why people spam a bunch of buffs before they enter a boss door. I do agree that it is a bit annoying when you miss the timing for one roll, and because of that you are hit stunned by like 4 other attacks and the boss is able to perform them before you can even get up, but when you can do this much damage without over leveling, it doesn't really matter. My favorite boss in this game is
Malenia, Blade of Mikola.
Yes, I do enjoy pain. All jokes aside, Malenia is without a doubt the hardest boss in the base game of Elden Ring. Not only does she heal every time she attacks something, meaning that you can't just use summons to cheese the fight, but she also has an attack that looks like this. Let's just say you don't want her to perform that attack. Needless to say, me and many other players struggled with this boss fight. The first time I fought her, I think it took me about 3 or 4 hours of attempts. However, when I beat her, I got a rush of excitement. I jumped out of my couch and stubbed my toe against the table next to me. Funny thing was, it didn't hurt. The excitement had overwhelmed the pain in my toe. It is this feeling of excitement when you beat a boss that only Souls games can replicate. When you first get to a boss of one of these games, they seem impossibly difficult and maybe even unfair to the point where you'll start getting annoyed. But when you finally beat the boss, you'll get excited and realize that it was actually quite fun trying to learn the boss's patterns. The reason why the bosses in this game move so much faster than the player is so that when the player enters a boss fight, it really makes them feel like they are at a disadvantage. Eventually, the player will figure out the timing for dodging and find openings to attack the boss. At this point is when the player will beat the boss, or at least get closer to doing so. And because the player saw how difficult the boss was at the start, it makes them feel like they really accomplished something. Elden Ring is littered with collectibles, weapons, and side quests to make exploration feel rewarding. Whenever I found an optional mini-boss that I decided to fight, it was always rewarding when I had beaten it. When you beat a boss, most of the time you are rewarded with an item. Now this can sometimes be bad for a game with different damage types and damage scaling. Imagine you're playing a strength build. You have a big hard-hitting sword that you use to take down a boss. When you beat the boss, you are rewarded with just one spell. Imagine spending all that time trying to defeat a boss and it rewards you with something that you would never use unless you respec. This is why every enemy and boss in Elden Ring rewards you with runes once you have defeated it. It rewards all players, even if the item obtained from beating the boss isn't useful for some players. Bosses normally drop a lot of runes, which basically lets you level up a bunch. The side quests always make gameplay feel really fun. Even if there was no reward for doing a side quest, it would always be a blast piecing together what you must do because this game doesn't have a quest log. This creates a similar experience to trying to figure out gameplay mechanics. It forces the player to listen to what NPCs are saying so that they don't miss anything about this quest. At some point in my playthrough, after I had gone through the hell that was Caelid and beaten Radahn, I had unlocked a new area. After defeating Radahn, a crater had opened up in Limgrave because Radahn was holding back the stars or something like that. When I jumped down into the crater, I was met by this. A city ruin under the lands between. This was my first time finding an area under the lands between, and because of that, I was surprised. Wait, there is more? It is this thought that had followed me through my whole playthrough. Whenever I entered a new area, that was the first thing I thought of before I was stunned in awe because this game looks like a painting in every area with any camera angle. Well, at least every area except Caelid. Caelid just looks like hell. I could go on for days about this game, but I'd like to end it here. Simply put, Elden Ring is amazing. At no point in my time playing this game did I ever feel bored or not know where to explore. Whenever I found something new in this game, it would just lead to more discoveries and even more discoveries. And that is one of the greatest compliments that I can give to a game.